The rain was merciless. It didn't fall, it attacked. Sharp, heavy drops hammered the ground. The hospital entrance shone like glass. Slippery, dangerous. Every step was a risk. Inside the ambulance bay, staff hurried. Papers in hand. Voices rising. Confusion already building. And then a figure ran through the storm. Paramedic. Her uniform clung to her body, soaked completely. Her long brown hair stuck to her face. Her boots splashed through the water. But her grip on the emergency bag. Steady. Strong. Her name was Nora Varga. But tonight, she wasn't just a paramedic. She was about to become something much more. As she entered the bay, a nurse waved her off. Paperwork first. Oxygen second. This is a hospital, not the street. The words were cold. Dismissive. A dying man waited behind her in the ambulance. Yet the system wanted papers. Nora paused. Only half a second. Her eyes sharp. Calm. Her voice cut like lightning. Oxygen before paperwork. Open the corridor.
No shouting. No panic.
Just certainty. The staff froze. Some shocked. Some annoyed. None of them knew those words would soon change everything. Who was she? Why did she sound so certain? Nora was 31 years old. Born of Austrian-Hungarian roots. Her beauty was unusual, cold, sharp features. But her eyes carried warmth. Calmness rare in emergencies. People noticed her scar. A thin line on her left wrist. They noticed the hardened skin on her finger. Signs of battles nobody ever spoke about. She didn't boast. She didn't explain. She just worked. Silently, precisely. Every morning at 5 a.m. Nora checked supplies. Oxygen tanks. Batteries. Epinephrine. Tourniquets. Small items that could decide between life or death. At 6 a.m. she walked the ambulance bay. She placed anti-slip mats. She taped arrows on the floor, pointing directions. She wedged doors open. She noted which lights flickered during storms. Tiny jobs. Jobs nobody asked for. Jobs nobody thanked her for. But when disaster struck, those small details became lifelines. Yet, inside the hospital, respect was rare. Nurses mocked. Doctors dismissed. Paramedics are good on the street. But inside the hospital, useless. Others whispered, "She's too thin to lift patients. Pretty girls shouldn't be out in the rain." Nora never argued. She smiled faintly and kept making notes in her private logbook. Rain didn't care about gender. Oxygen didn't care about titles. And Nora didn't care about insults. She cared only about preparation. That night, the call came. 12:07 p.m. A disaster. 2 buses. Head-on collision on the coastal bridge. A fuel truck overturned. Diesel spilling across the road. Fire risk. Dozens trapped. Blood. Screams. Chaos. The hospital declared a mass casualty incident. Level 2. The rain kept pouring. The ambulance bay flooded quickly. Water spiraled into whirlpools near the entrance. Staff stumbled on the slick floor. And then Nora's ambulance arrived. It looked ordinary, old, worn out. Nobody praised it. But inside it was stocked with precision. Every piece of equipment in its place. She switched off the siren. Swung open the back doors. Rain hammered the floor inside. Her first patient. An old man gasping for air. Oxygen levels dropping dangerously. Every second mattered. She pushed the stretcher forward. But once again, a nurse blocked her path. Forms first. Beds are occupied. The man wheezed, chest rising and falling like a broken bellows. His lips turned pale. He needed oxygen now. Nora's face stayed calm. Her words steady. Oxygen before paperwork. Divide hot, cold. Open the corridor. The nurse hesitated. Other staff looked on. They thought it was arrogance. But soon they would see it was something else. Nora didn't just see patients. She saw the whole battlefield. She saw the rain flooding the bay. She saw the mats sliding. She saw staff running into each other. She saw patients arriving with no clear path inside. She could see disaster before it unfolded. And she knew If someone didn't take control, people would die before reaching the trauma rooms. So she asked for one thing. Not applause. Not authority. Just 7 minutes. 7 minutes to prove she could turn chaos into order. 7 minutes that would shock the hospital. The storm roared. Rain slammed against the hospital walls. Water pooled, rising higher, swallowing the ambulance bay. Inside, panic grew. Doctors shouted over each other. Nurses struggled with clipboards and bedsheets. Security tried to push families back. Everyone was busy, but nobody was in control. And then Nora stepped forward. Her voice was steady, calm, precise. I'm directing the bay. 2 staff. 1 security guard. 7 minutes. That's all I need. The charge nurse frowned. You don't have authority here. Nora nodded respectfully. Authority isn't the issue. Lives are. 7 minutes. Something in her tone, firm, logical, unshaken, made them pause. Against the storm, against the chaos, her voice felt like order. They gave her the chance. And that changed everything. She moved like she'd done this 1,000 times.
No hesitaschen. No wasted breath.
First, the floor. She flipped anti-slip mats, turning them into barriers. Rainwater that had been flooding the oxygen supply entrance was redirected. A small change, but one that could prevent an explosion. Next, she taped bright arrows on the wet ground. One clear path, from ambulance to trauma bay. A straight corridor through the chaos. Then she pointed. You position those chairs here. Transfer patients who can walk. Beds are for the critical ones only. It wasn't just smart. It was strategic. She freed up stretchers without humiliating patients. Dignity and efficiency together. She kept moving. Every second mattered. Every action solved 3 problems at once. Towels along the slippery steps. No more risk of staff falling with stretchers. Security. She ordered them to enforce one-way traffic. Entry right, exit left. No exceptions. Suddenly, the human traffic jam cleared. Families tried to record videos with cell phones, blocking stretchers, endangering patients. Nora stepped in, her words gentle, firm. Cameras to that corner. Oxygen happens here. No yelling, no fights, but the crowd obeyed. Something in her voice left no room for doubt. She grabbed a tarp from her ambulance. With quick hands, she built a barrier. One side was now the hot zone, critical patients. The other, the cold zone, stable cases waiting safely. She even stacked empty boxes into steps, so stretchers wouldn't slip on the wet ramp. Every move was improvised, but executed like a soldier. Precise, efficient, perfect. And the patients? One by one, they were stabilized. Patient 1. The old man gasping for breath. Mask on. Oxygen flowing. His saturation climbed from 86% to 93%. Life returning. Patient 2. A man with a broken femur. Bleeding fast. She tied a tourniquet. Exact pressure. Time written on the band in waterproof ink. Not a second wasted. Patient 3. Severe bronchial constriction. She prepared a nebulizer. Handed it to a nurse at the right moment. Knowledge flawless. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't lucky. She was trained. Trained in a way most paramedics never were. But danger wasn't done. The smell of diesel filled the air. Fuel from the overturned truck drifted toward the bay. Toxic. Flammable. Deadly. Someone, shaking with fear, lit a cigarette. The lighter clicked. Flame almost born. Nora was there in an instant. Her hand gripped his wrist. Not violent, but precise. Enough pressure to force him to drop the lighter in pain without injury. No flames near oxygen, she said. Her voice carried across the bay. Everyone froze. Everyone listened. Then the lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the bay. Suction machines stopped. Fear spread like fire. But Nora raised her flashlight. Low light, she called out. Her tone, steady, commanding, was enough to calm the staff. Everyone adjusted. Nobody panicked. It was as if she had seen this exact situation before. as if she had lived through darker storms. And in those 7 minutes, the ambulance bay transformed. What had been chaos was now a battlefield command center. Clear corridors, safe zones, oxygen flowing, traffic controlled. Every person had a role. Every movement had a purpose. Patients received care without delay. The storm still raged outside, but inside order ruled. Doctors whispered to each other. Who organized this? A paramedic. Her name is Nora. For the first time, they looked at her differently. Not as a street paramedic. Not as a pretty girl. But as a leader. They didn't know her past. But they could see her present. And it was extraordinary. The rain still hammered the roof. The storm refused to stop. But inside the ambulance bay there was calm. Order. Control. Patients were breathing. Doctors were working smoothly. For the first time that night, hope returned. And at the center of it all stood Nora. Not shouting. Not demanding credit. Just steady. Quietly making sure every detail held. But not everyone was satisfied. A nurse, the same one who demanded paperwork first, raised her voice again. Who said oxygen before forms? Who's responsible for breaking protocol? The bay went silent. Every eye turned toward Nora. She looked directly at the nurse. Her words calm, her tone sharp as steel. Are you responsible for patients? Or for forms? The silence deepened. The nurse lowered her head. The truth needed no argument. It was then that one man noticed the details others missed. Dr. Miller, an emergency physician, but also a former military medic. His eyes narrowed. He watched the way Nora tied a tourniquet. Perfect pressure. Textbook flawless. He saw how she checked patients without machines. Breathing. Skin color. Pupils. Fast. Accurate. Reliable. Then his gaze dropped to her hands. On her index finger, a callus. The kind formed only by handling weapons. On her wrist, a scar, thin but deep. The mark of someone who had lived through something brutal. Dr. Miller's suspicion grew. This was no ordinary paramedic. Others noticed too. On Nora's wrist, tied carefully, was a thin red cord. 3 precise knots. An older nurse asked about it. What does that mean? Nora's reply was simple. 3 times.
No lights.
3 people alive. Then she pulled her sleeve back down. No more words. But to Dr. Miller, that cord spoke volumes. He had seen such things before. Among soldiers. Special forces. The kind who survived impossible missions. Eric, the elderly supply manager, had also been watching. He had seen her replace batteries in evacuation lights. He had seen her fix ECG electrodes with needle-like precision. He had seen the way she treated every small task like it could save a life. Quietly, he walked to a storage cabinet. He pulled out a steel-wrapped pen. Engraved with strange letters, K11 Delta. He placed it on a table, then looked at the doctors. Someone left this behind long ago, he said softly. Tonight, I saw someone who knows how to use it. Dr. Miller froze. He recognized that symbol. It wasn't ordinary. It belonged to classified units. Elite forces. The kind the world never talks about. Minutes later, a car pulled up outside the hospital. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a rain-soaked jacket. His name, Lieutenant Commander Marcus. He walked in with urgency. Someone had called him. The words still rang in his head. We just saw someone coordinate emergency response with impossible skill. Name Nora Varga. Marcus knew that name. And when he entered the bay, his eyes found the red cord on her wrist. 3 knots. He stopped in his tracks. His face changed. Recognition. His voice dropped low, almost reverent. Ghost-11, he whispered. At Korav Pass, 719. When radios failed, you opened the corridor. 8 lives saved. Today, you opened a corridor for an entire hospital. The bay fell silent. Every staff member froze. The rain still roared outside, but inside, time stopped. The nurse who had mocked Nora lowered her head. Shame heavy in her eyes. But Nora didn't smile. She didn't embrace the recognition. Her words were plain. Patients are still in treatment. Medical review before applause. Doctors who had dismissed her now looked at her with awe, not because of her past, but because of what she had just done before their eyes. Soon the debrief began. Right there in the rain, Nora knelt down with a waterproof marker. On a wet tarp she drew diagrams. Her voice clear, her words simple. Oxygen before paperwork. Divide hot, cold, open corridor. She explained like a teacher. Direct, practical, no fancy language. Only rules that saved lives. Dr. Miller asked, "How did you assess patients without machines?" Nora's reply was calm. Breathing pattern, skin color, pupil response. 3 indicators. They work anywhere. No technology needed. Another doctor asked, "How did you stay calm when the lights went out?" Nora's eyes softened. Storms teach you. Rain doesn't care about fear. Give it a job and it becomes an ally. Her words didn't just explain. They struck deep. They revealed a truth doctors had forgotten. Then came the biggest question. Would you join our disaster leadership program? Dr. Lawson, the chief of emergency medicine, asked. Nora's reply was brief. No names.
No photographs.
Just training in storms. That's enough. The staff exchanged glances, some in disbelief, some in quiet respect. For the first time, they realized this wasn't a paramedic seeking recognition. This was someone who had already seen too much. Someone who served without asking for applause. The storm outside began to fade. The sky was still dark, but the rain softened. Drops tapped gently on the roof now. Not bullets anymore. Inside the hospital, the ambulance bay was calm. Order held. Patients were safe. The chaos had passed. But something deeper had happened. The hospital itself had changed. Dr. Lawson, the emergency chief, stepped outside. He breathed heavily, still processing. 20 years in emergency medicine. He had seen mass casualties. He had seen blood, fire, and panic. But never had he seen a bay transform into a battlefield command center in minutes. And the one who made it happen, not a chief surgeon, not a decorated officer, not a senior doctor, paramedic, Nora Varga. Word spread quickly through the corridors. Nurses whispered. Security guards nodded with respect. Even the supply staff watched in silence. This woman had done what no one else could. And she had done it quietly, without shouting, without demanding authority. Small changes began that very night. The anti-slip mats Nora had flipped into water barriers. They were redesigned permanently. Hinges were added so rainwater would never again flood the oxygen entrance. Directional arrows she had taped, they were painted permanently into the floor. Entry right, exit left. No more confusion. Low-light switches were installed along the bay. So when power failed again, panic would not. Nora didn't stop. She began training. Not for doctors only. Not for senior staff. But for the people usually ignored. Porters, security guards, nursing assistants, patient transport workers. She taught them how to clear corridors, how to separate critical from stable cases, how to hold doors, push stretchers, manage flow. Anyone can save lives, she told them. You don't need titles. You need focus and courage. Soon, her 3 rules spread everywhere. Oxygen before paperwork. Divide hot and cold. Open the corridor. In pediatrics, doctors used them for seizure emergencies. In obstetrics, they created low-light protocols for grieving families to preserve dignity. Security staff adopted hand signals to direct traffic instantly. Even on the whiteboard in the morning briefing room, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Oxygen before paperwork. Divide hot/cold. Open corridor. Breath over fear." The culture of the hospital was shifting, not because of policies, but because of one woman's actions. And the people who had doubted her most, they too changed. The nurse who once blocked her with paperwork brought Nora a hot cup of tea. Her voice quiet. "I'm sorry. I put forms over airways. I was wrong." Nora smiled gently. On rainy days, everyone gets wet. Let's dry the anger first. Simple words, but they healed. They taught. Hidden reminders appeared everywhere. Carved under the baize door handle, 719, open corridor. Inside the oxygen cabinet, a piece of colored tape carried these words: if panicking, follow arrows. It wasn't just policy. It was memory. It was culture. Doctors began to see differently too. One day, Dr. Lawson slipped quietly into a training session. He watched Nora guide each participant, not with pride, but with precision. Her focus on the smallest detail, her patience with the slowest learner. Before leaving, he picked up a marker and added a line to the board. Today, I learned emergency medicine from a paramedic. That's the best thing that can happen to a doctor. The room laughed softly, not with mockery but with gratitude. Years passed, but the storm of that night never left St. Northwatch General. Every emergency after carried her mark. Corridors were kept clear. Oxygen always came before papers. Traffic flowed smoothly. Staff didn't just follow protocol. They followed principles. Nora's principles. And what about Nora? She never asked for a higher title. She never demanded recognition. She remained a paramedic, a quiet figure arriving before dawn, checking supplies, placing arrows, drying equipment no one noticed. Her strength wasn't in being seen. It was in being prepared, and in teaching others to be ready. Her story became a lesson that leadership in crisis doesn't come from shouting. It doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from paperwork. It comes from clarity, from calm, from courage when the storm hits hardest. So the next time someone says, paperwork first, remember her words, oxygen first, because lives cannot wait.